So for a while now, the JBL Boombox has been a fan favorite for a lot of people looking for a portable Bluetooth speaker. But now, Ultimate Ears has put out a formidable contender, their all-new UE Hyperboom. Now, just keep in mind, the JBL Boombox 2 is slated to be released in the next few months. But for now, let's see how the new Hyperboom stacks up to the original JBL Boombox. Now, first off, let's address pricing. Unfortunately, the Boombox's retail price has increased from $450 to $500 from when it first came out. But it does routinely go on sale for $400 currently, whereas the Hyperboom has a retail price of $400. Personally, I would only recommend that you pick up the Boombox if you can get it for $400, because I don't want you to suffer from buyer's remorse later on. But regardless, if you want to pick either of these speakers up, they'll be linked down below. And if you want to learn more about either of these speakers, please watch their full reviews, because we're only going to be going over their main differences. But now let's go over these speakers' designs, because it's a bigger deal than you might actually think. Now, both of these speakers have fabric bodies, so they can stand up to constant bumps and scrapes, and they both have built-in carrying handles, so you can easily take them on the go with you. And they both aren't afraid of a little bit of water. But the important thing to take note of here is that the Boombox is a horizontal speaker, whereas the Hyperboom is a vertical speaker. And personally, I found that I prefer the Hyperboom's vertical form factor because it takes up less surface area on a table or when it's on the floor. So I found that I have more options when it comes to placing my Hyperboom in my cramped studio or bedroom. Whereas with the Boombox, I just don't have that same flexibility. So if you're someone that lives in a small or cramped place and wants big sound in a condensed package, then I highly recommend the Hyperboom in that case. Now, when it comes to battery life, these speakers are evenly matched. Now, both of these speakers have an advertised battery life of 24 hours, but real-world use with the volume set at 80%, both of these speakers are good for around 8 to 9 hours of playback time. They both even have a USB-A out port so that you can charge your own devices. But really, the only major difference here is that the Boombox has 2 USB-A out ports, whereas the Hyperboom only has 1 USB-A out port. But while we're discussing ports, I do want to point out that the Hyperboom has a built-in optical port. So if you want, you can actually hook the Hyperboom up directly to your TV or gaming console, making the Hyperboom a little more versatile over the Boombox, in my opinion. But when it comes to Bluetooth connectivity, the Hyperboom is using Bluetooth 5.0, whereas the Boombox is using Bluetooth 4.2. But more importantly, both of these speakers can be connected to 2 devices at the same time, so you and a friend can both be DJ. But now let's talk about speaker setups. The Hyperboom has dual 4.5-inch woofers and dual 1-inch tweeters shooting out the front of the speaker, and there's dual 3.5-inch by 7.5-inch rectangular passive radiators shooting out the back. Whereas the Boombox has dual 4-inch woofers and dual 3/4-inch tweeters shooting out the front of the speaker, and dual passive radiators shooting out the sides of the speaker. And for curiosity's sakes, I'm also going to be including the JBL Extreme 2 on the sound test, which just has a similar speaker setup as the Boombox, but just smaller. But before we jump into the sound test, I do want to point out that the Hyperboom has an adjustable EQ. But for this sound test, I'm going to be using its stock flat EQ. Whereas with the Boombox, its EQ isn't as customizable like the Hyperboom, but you can switch between indoor mode and outdoor mode. So you're going to hear both in the sound test.
Girl's a wonder. She loves me as get enough. I know this is love, so come close to me while we're still young. Why don't you touch me, touch me, touch me, why don't you love me, love me, love me? Touch me, touch me, touch me no more.
So like you may have just heard, the JBL Boombox is definitely brighter than the Hyperboom when it's in both indoor mode and outdoor mode. But like I mentioned earlier, the Hyperboom has a fully customizable EQ. So if you want to bring the mids out a little bit, you can do that. But when it comes to overall performance, the Hyperboom does get louder than the Boombox, and it also has more bass than the Boombox. The Hyperboom's most standout characteristic is just the sheer amount of bass it has, whereas with the Boombox, when you increase the volume on it, the Boombox gets to a point where it stops increasing its bass, but just makes the highs louder, making the Boombox sound very bright at max volume by comparison to the Hyperboom, which sounds fuller and warmer at max volume. But something that the Boombox does have going for it is that you do get a noticeable performance bump when it's plugged in versus when it's not. It gets louder and you get a little bit more bass. Whereas with the Hyperboom, I don't notice any real performance difference when it's plugged in versus when it's not. But nonetheless, I do feel the Hyperboom still outperforms the Boombox, even when the Boombox is plugged in. But now, this leads us back to the speaker setup. Since both of the pass radiators are placed on the back of the Hyperboom, if you place it up against a wall, then its bass is going to get amplified because the bass has something to bounce off of. Whereas with the Boombox, since its radiators shoot out its sides, it's a little harder to achieve the same effect. And finally, since the Hyperboom has an adaptive EQ, even if you were to place the speaker up against a wall, it's not going to get overpowered by its own bass because its EQ will automatically readjust itself so that it still sounds as balanced as possible. So overall, over the last few weeks that I've had both of these speakers side by side in my studio, I tend to find myself reaching for the Hyperboom when I'm going to play music. But finally, this leads us to the speaker pairing protocols. So the Hyperboom is using Party Up, so you can pair it up to another Hyperboom, or you can pair it up to a Mega Boom 3 or Boom 3. And Party Up still supports some of UE's older speakers, which is always nice. And also, very quickly, while we're here, I also want to point out that you can remotely power the Hyperboom on or off straight from its app, which is something that you just can't do with the Boombox. But getting back to the Boombox is using JBL Connect Plus. So you can only pair the Boombox up to other JBL Connect Plus speakers like the Flip 4, Charge 3, Charge 4, Pulse 3, Extreme 2, or to another Boombox. But unfortunately, JBL Connect Plus technically is last gen because JBL's newer speakers like the Pulse 4, Flip 5, and the soon to be released JBL Boombox 2 are all using JBL Party Boost. So you can't pair a JBL Connect Plus speaker to a JBL Party Boost speaker. And a lot of people, including myself, feel like this is forced obsolescence. But in my testing, I did find that JBL Party Boost does have some significant performance improvements over JBL Connect Plus. But nonetheless, I'm trying to give you a heads up for the future if you plan on picking up an original JBL Boombox today. But overall, I really do prefer the UE Hyperboom over the JBL Boombox here. I think it sounds better, it performs better, it's easier to place around the house thanks to its vertical layout, it's more versatile thanks to that optical port, and you can make it sound however you want thanks to its customizable EQ. The Hyperboom is a great speaker that you can use at home and then just as easily take it on the go with you. So for today, the UE Hyperboom is the clear winner. But that could all quickly change because the JBL Boombox 2 is on its way. If you made it this far, I guess you enjoyed the video, so hit that like button and get subscribed. It helps out more than you realize. If you want to pick any of the products up mentioned in this video, those will be linked in the description down below, and you can also support the channel by checking out the merch store. But other than that, I'll catch you next time.